Another one of those days. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another video. Today, we're going to be breaking down a guitar beat that I made the other day. It's fire. It's got that chill, bouncy, internet money vibe. And I'm going to go ahead and break it down for you guys today. So without further ado, let's get into it. So like the last video, I'm using this finger nylon acoustic guitar preset in Expand. It's number 7 in the guitars pack here. And we're playing this pattern. We're in F sharp minor, one of my favorite scales, and something that I haven't done very much in recent times is actually use 7th chords. For those who don't know how to make a 7th chord, you can bring up scale highlighting here. We'll go over here and you can place any note. We'll go with G sharp. And when you've got the scale highlighting here, you click every second highlighted note until you get 4 notes, and that's a 7th. This is a G minor 7th because the gaps between the first 2 notes is 2, and then it goes 3, and then it goes 2. If it was a major, this will be out of the scale, but if it was a major, it would go 3, then 2, and 3. You see? But the first chord here is an F minor 7th, and you can see the strumming pattern I've got here. And I've just inverted the 3rd here, which is a sound I love. For both triads and 7th chords, inverting the 3rd always sounds great. So you can see for this chord progression, I've done the same thing. Same strumming pattern. However, on every second chord, I brought it back a beat so that we've got a little bit of syncopation, a little bit of bounce. So that it's not just going on the one every single time. So that part's very simple. I haven't even duplicated for any bass notes or anything. We've just got the chords and a really basic melody here. And like all of my videos, when I'm explaining melody, a lot of the notes that I use in my melodies are in the chords that they're built upon. So as you can see here, F sharp is the root of this chord. E is the root, which goes down to the D, which is the 5th. And then on this next chord, C sharp is the root. So we're going from we've got root note, 5th, root. So it's very basic in terms of theory, if that makes sense. And if we have simple melodies, ones that you can, hum or sing along with or follow, it's a good melody. So that's for the first 4 bars. We've got this 4-note melody, very simple. And then for this part, we've just got a slight variation. If we copy this over, you'll see we've got the same notes, except instead of going straight down to the C sharp here, we've got a jump up to the E, which is actually the 3rd of this chord. So we've got a little bit of variation, but just enough to keep it interesting. And as always, Alt R to randomize the velocities in this guitar and most guitar instruments, VSTs, randomizing the velocities just brings life to the instrument. So make sure you're doing that. So with that out of the way, the guitar sounds like this. For effects on the guitar, we got a really basic EQ cutting out the low end so we don't clash with any sub bass as always. We've got some fruity reverb. Pretty much it's just the stock settings. I think I turned up the wet level a slight bit, very barely. And then we've got Echo Boy here. I've got it on ping pong and we've got 2 quarter note ping pongs here with the feedback down fairly low. Just for a little bit of stereo ping pong, obviously. Here you have the sub bass. Made in Serum. This is my Reese patch that I've made. I've explained it in a few videos before. Basically, it's just this saw wave with unison 8, a little bit of detune, this filter with the cutoff turned down a little bit and a little bit of resonance. And basically, I tweaked the attack so that it didn't pop and turned the decay up so that it didn't turn off too quickly. So playing this melody, it's not even a melody. This is the root notes of the chords that I just showed you before. And for a little bit of variation, I've just used the D as a passing tone down here during this chord. But yeah, like I said, a little bit of variation. Yeah, this is what the sub bass sounds like. And if you remember the guitar pattern, this passing tone down here is very similar to this pattern here. So as this E passes down to the C, we've got E, D, E, C sharp. So there's some similarities between the melody and the bass, which sort of glues it all together and makes it sound more cohesive. And like most times, I put a decapitator on the sub bass with the P style distortion with the drive up between about 3 and 5, depending on what type of track it is. Just gives it a little bit more grit. I love the sound of this distortion. Next, I loaded up Nexus with this 808 Mafia pack. I'm using the flute solo preset here. And I'm again following a very similar melody to the guitar, but the main difference here is I'm using these short staccato notes, is I think what you'd call them, with some octave duplication for a little bit of emphasis. And so that it punches through the mix a little bit, because these low notes sort of got drowned out, as these lower notes are sort of within the same frequency range of the guitar. And that's something you want to keep in mind. If a lot of your instruments are occupying the same frequency range, you really want to make sure that either you EQ the sound so that each of them have their own space, or you just shift one up an octave or a couple of semitones to make sure it's still in key though. To make sure that they each have their own space and you can each hear them without having to think too hard about it, if that makes sense. For the first half of this melody just follows the guitar with a slight bit of variation towards the end of each 4 bars. And that's a lot of the time when you want a lot of your variation towards the end of the 4 bars. Now this is totally subjective and whatever sounds good to you, so take this with a grain of salt. But if you want to do something unique, something a little bit different, moving it towards the end of the 4 or 8 bars or whatever you want is, in my opinion, the best way. Because if the first at least half is the same each time, you can sort of follow that and sort of get into the rhythm of whatever vibe or melody or whatever it is that's playing. And then with a little bit of variation at the end of each sequence, you've then got repetition, which is important for a great song, and variation, which is also important for a great song. But you don't want too much of each, otherwise it gets boring or you can't follow what's going on. So that's a great way to make sure you're getting a good balance of both in your tracks. When it comes to variation, you can use the notes and the chords and stuff of that nature, but mainly if you work off about the same position of notes and switching around what type of notes they are, and also slightly changing the rhythm and not going too drastically far from where you were before, is a great place to start. But if it sounds good, it sounds good. Go with what you like. So this is what the flute sounds like. For the next instrument, I loaded up Nexus again, and I'm in this Bazza Beats B-Day XP bank, and I'm using this Pluck 2. And how I made this is basically, if I invert the top notes, these are regular triads. So this is like the 7th chords of the guitar without the root note, and just played at different times. So I just inverted the root note, and then I duplicated that over 8 bars, and then I also duplicated it up 2 octaves. Super simple, playing a lot of the same notes, a lot of layering going on. You don't need to do too much in terms of counter melodies and playing different notes. You know, don't fix what's not broken. So this is what this sounds like. Finally, I got some vocal chops from Arcade. We're in this Leave Me Anyway bank, and I've got the slow delay up to just below about half and the space up to 75%. Obviously in F sharp minor, so you stay in key. And then I'm just playing this note pattern. Something to note is the first half is the same, and then you duplicate the first half over and you have a little bit of variation. So I decided to keep these notes the same, and I just shifted this up to the A because that sounded good. And then I went up to the C, but the melody that this chop by itself had, I didn't particularly like. So in Arcade, every sharp note is a like an effect. So I just played with the different sharp notes on top of this vocal chop, and this one down here just suited the best, in my opinion. So a lot of this is trial and error, just doing what sounds good to you, basically. In Arcade, nothing's out of key as long as you set the right session key in the beginning. But this is what that sounds like. Super fire. And because usually Arcade vocal chops are quite forefront, if I want an artist on this, I don't really want 2 sets of vocals competing with each other at the same time. So what I did is I put Ozone Imager on here with a bit of width to spread it out. I put quite a lot of reverb on it with the stereo separation dial out to spread it out even further. And then I took quite a narrow EQ band to sort of cut it down and push it back into the mix. It's also layered fairly far in the back, so it's not competing too harshly with everything else. Moving on to the drums, we have a hi-hat. This is a very basic two-step pattern, but basically all I did is I took out every second slot where the clap would play, and also I've gone to this magnet. You go to 6th step, and I like to go in and cut the very first grid off the hi-hat so that it has its own like stutter at the beginning. You'll hear exactly what I mean when I play it. And I like to go in on the 1 and then every now and again do it again. Especially what I think is fire is having 3 in a row where the bounce fits. So if you don't do this, give it a go. It's a very subtle way to spice up your hi-hat, and I think it sounds fire, so check it out. So that just repeats. Basic clap. Got the velocities turned right up so that it's nice and loud, nice and punchy in the mix. Got this accent snare. Got this open hat. Now with all those drums and the kick together, this just basically follows the 808 pattern, but I'll play this without the 808 so that you can hear it, know what it sounds like. Very nice. Now I've got this 808 with the boost turned up to 7% because I like the way it clips. Pretty standard 808. It just plays the root notes with some bounce. Notice in the first bar, I only have 1 note because I feel like if you have too many 808 or if you have too many 808 notes playing, it can be a little bit hectic. So I like to pick my spot and not go too ham on the 808s, if that makes sense. But this is what the drums sound like. Super fire. Now in terms of arrangement, pretty basic stuff. We got a 16 bar intro. First part has the sub bass, second part has the flute to introduce that into the hook. And now for the hook, I don't usually do this, but I have the second bar cut out on each part of the hook, as well as the last bar of the first part of the hook, which I do quite often, as you've seen in my other beat breakdowns. But something that's unique to this beat is the first bar of the guitar is cut out, as well as we've got the staccato flutes coming in the beginning. It sort of breaks down before the start of the second part of the hook, and then it drops, and then it drops again when the guitar actually comes back in, and then it drops again when all the drums come in, and then that's the entirety of the verse for 6/8 or 3/4 of the verse. So there's like 3 mini drops before it actually drops in entirely, which I think gives it a whole lot more energy. And it's probably my favorite part, to be honest. And then after the hook, I do this a lot on the first part of the verse. I bring in 2 instruments that I haven't necessarily played in the intro by themselves, and then I take all the drums, bring them over a bar, cut them out, and then where the 808 isn't playing, I like to introduce the sub bass for the first bar so that it sort of comes out of the hook, has a break for a bar, and then drops right back in. But it doesn't have the same energy as the hook because we don't have the main element, which is the guitar. So it's all about variation. It's about changing energy. It's about dropping. It's about taking elements out. And if you master those things, your arrangement will go up levels. Trust. And basically, I bring the guitar back in, but you can see this is number 2 here. All I did is I went in here and pitched it up an octave. This guitar is up an octave higher than the original guitar. We've got the pluck and the vocal chops into the last part of the verse, which just has the octave higher guitar, the sub bass, the plucks, hi-hat and clap for the first half, and then it brings the accent snare in for the second half of the last half of the verse to build up into the hook. And I just have some transition effects, one of which is a riser that I made myself. This is the Tri-Freeze transition in his free drum kit. Very nice. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So, let me know what you think. If you like the video, subscribe if you want to see more content, hit the bell notification to be notified next time I post a video. Appreciate you all for watching, and yeah, until next time, stay safe, stay healthy, get sleep, drink water, all that good stuff, and I'll see you in the next video. I love you. Next I loaded up Nexus with this 808 Mafia. Next I loaded up Nexus with this fuck, bro. Next I loaded up Nexus with this Next I loaded